Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the April 9, 2008 regular meeting of the City of Glendale Civil Service Commission. Ms. Torres, could we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Here.
Commissioner Manukian?
Here.
Commissioner Abkarian?
Here.
Chair Gantis?
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Coleman is absent.
Thank you. What is next?
Reading of the minutes.
Okay, we have the minutes from the meeting of March 26, 2008. What is your pleasure, gentlemen?
Move to approve. Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Braden.
one comment on the minutes on page 3 in the first paragraph, where second sentence where it said Ron Braden, Chief Assistant City Attorney, responded, "They are not violating any rule." What I clearly remember my saying was Ron Braden, in essence, Ron Braden, Chief Assistant City Attorney, responded that based upon Commissioner Devine's comments, they were not violating any rule. So I can't make a motion to amend the minutes, but
I make the motion to amend.
Is that your only change, Mr. Braden?
yes, sir.
Okay, could we, are there any other changes, folks? Yes, Mr. Devine.
I have several things. Number one, on the first, on page 2 of 6.
2 of 6?
5.
2 of 5, I'm sorry. Item number 6, where it says, Commissioner Devine said he understood, so on. The second to last line, it says, and background as a fire protection engineer is very different than, and that should be than, not then.
Where are you talking about?
On the 4th paragraph down, starts off, Commissioner Devine said he understood.
Yes.
Okay, the third line down.
Okay, the fourth line down.
Fourth line down, okay.
Says engineering is very different than.
Than. T-H-A-N.
And, right. And
Do
that.
you understand where that is, Miss? Okay. The word then, D-H-E-N, should be than, T-H-A-N.
Okay. The last line, it says, where it says is different, it should be are different.
Process is different. It's a process, a singular.
No, the skills and knowledge are different.
Oh. Testing process is different, and the skills and knowledge are different. So add the words after skills and knowledge are different for the fire protection engineer, and then cross out is different.
Can we just say
Is that correct?
Testing.
Well, it'd just be easy.
So either that or put R at the end.
Put
That's
are
correct.
instead of is.
Instead of is, it's R, A-R-E.
All right, the next
Why don't we
paragraph.
just put testing process is, process, comma, skills, knowledge.
No, it's too much of a change.
Okay.
Let's just do what he
Okay,
wants.
just change the is to an are.
Yes.
The next paragraph where it said, and again, she's quoting me again, he said that he recommends the name and classification be changed to reflect what duties of the position really are, possibly calling it fire safety or fire prevention. I absolutely and unequivocally did not say that. That is I never use the words duties of the position. What happened here is this is a compilation of several things I was talking about, and it's paraphrased totally incorrectly, and this is the intent and the meaning of what I was trying to say. So
What is the intent and meaning?
well, rather than go into that, because it's lengthy, I would like just to have that first sentence deleted.
Okay, next.
Which sentence is that?
First
Do you know?
sentence on the 5th paragraph. Starting, he said that.
Just delete that.
Let me start. Let me do this. Hold on just a second.
Yeah, just make a quote.
I'm going to do it.
to her.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. Go ahead. Next.
Next page on 3 of 6, second paragraph, where it said Commissioner Abkarian said he didn't feel comfortable voting for this item at this time due to the legal issues that were brought up. Then it says he recommended that this class specification be revised and brought back to the commission, and he did not do that.
I think he said that it'd be revisited and brought back to the commission. In other words, and that's what we are doing tonight. Revisited, is that what you said, Mr. Abkarian?
He did not say that. What actually happened was I played the tape back. He started and he said, I recommend that, and I very rudely at that point interrupted him, and he never made a recommendation.
So Divine, don't do that again. So why don't you
I
just
apologize.
take that whole
So take
sentence
that
out?
sentence
Why don't we take that sentence out as well? I'm marking this up for you, Sandra, so go ahead. Next.
That's it.
That's it. Any other?
I was just joking about that.
So what did we do with yours, Ron? I'm sorry. Tell me what we did with yours. We took out your sentence? Also?
Well, I said, you can take it out or...
Let's take it out. I've removed the sentence.
Okay.
Okay. Motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
I'm going to get you guys new hobbies.
Is that your motion?
Yes.
Second, Mr. Devine?
Second.
I'll vote roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine,
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian,
Yes.
Commissioner Karian,
Just say yes.
Yes.
Chair Gantis.
Yes, and the motion reads as corrected.
Absolutely.
I said that as amended, and dispense with reading.
Yes.
Isn't that what you said, Mr. Manukian?
Yes, sir.
Isn't that
Yes.
what you seconded, Mr. Devine?
Absolutely.
What is next?
Oral communications.
I have no cards. Anybody wishing to address the commission on items that are not a part of this agenda, the time is now to speak. Anybody wish to address the commission? None appearing. Oral communications is closed. Next, please.
Recruitment and examination status report.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the report you have once again indicates the recruitment activity that the city is addressing. Each of the analysts from my staff are listed there, along with the various departments and recruitments that they have in some stage of the process. As you can see at the very end of the report, it shows a total of 91 processes at various stages. If you have any questions on any of these recruitments, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Any questions? No action necessary. What is next?
Eligible list established.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, these are the eligible lists that have been established since our last meeting 2 weeks ago. We have just two for you. Both of them are promotional recruitments involving small numbers of candidates as well as very short eligible lists. We have one for fire, one for water and power. Have any questions on that? I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? None appearing. We have no action taken. What is next, please?
Report on meeting minutes preparation.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is an item that Commissioner Devine had asked us to bring back from a few months ago, involving the preparation of our minutes for the Civil Service Commission meetings. Currently, the staff prepares a rather lengthy, detailed set of minutes following each meeting, which provide in general summary narrative of the comments made, and we try to get a general gist of what is being said by speakers, by staff, and by the commissioners themselves. The minutes do report upon the action ultimately taken in the form of the vote, and who voted for in the yay and who voted nay. In order to bring this back to you, we did try and research if there's any guidelines or rules that impact how these are to be prepared, and there is a section in our civil service rules which address meeting minutes. It's found in Rule 12, Section 7, and really it seems to favor a more bare bones approach to minute preparation. Talks about really that the Secretary of the Commission having to record time and place of each meeting, names of the commissioners, all official acts of the commission, and then the votes given by the commissioners. It does surprisingly require that these be brought back at the next regularly scheduled meeting. As far as the research we did in preparing this report, we simply looked to see what was being done elsewhere in the organization. Commissioner Devine had appeared to be a proponent of what's known as action minutes, which is a much more brief form of presenting minutes, where essentially there's brief comments and brief reflection upon the main action items that are taken in the course of a meeting, identifying who the speakers are, what the motion would be, and ultimately the vote being taken. We looked at several of the major boards and commissions throughout the city, and there's a table at the conclusion of this report showing which of these boards and commissions utilize the action minutes versus the more lengthy detailed minutes and general narrative minutes. And essentially it's pretty even, although the City Council, Redevelopment Agency, Housing Authority utilizes the action minute format. I did consult with our planning director, Mr. Hagani, who has been somewhat of a proponent of the action minutes format. His department has more boards and commissions to deal with than any other department, At one time, they had 5. Now I believe they have 4 to deal with, between Planning Commission, 2 design review boards, historic preservation, and he found that the more detailed, longer minutes were just an incredible burden on his staff's time. He found that it was detracting from their ability to do very important things like, public noticing, getting letters out, and simply, answering their phones. So he has pushed that with all of the planning department boards and commissions. It was also pointed out that nowadays with the online video archiving that we have, it is rather convenient now for any individual to go online and simply look up the portion of the meeting that they wanted to find information on, and really get an exact verbatim record of what was said at that meeting, not subject to anyone's interpretation. Those meetings, in fact, all meetings now are televised, and they're all available on DVDs through the GTV6 crew. Civil Service Commission, we have traditionally used the longer narrative meeting minutes, and I think they have served us well. Although I have to say they are time-consuming to prepare, and the person it impacts mostly is Ms. Torres here, who spends quite a bit of time preparing those and going over drafts and listening to the reports of what was said at the previous meeting. And these minutes work okay, and there is some degree of convenience to having those done in writing, where someone who may not have access to a computer or access to the DVD can easily kind of flip through the pages and find what they're looking for. So there's pros and cons for each, but generally it seems that the organization as a whole is moving towards the more detailed action minutes, largely due to the technology we now have. I want to try to be as objective as possible, but I think I'd be foolish to say that I didn't say that the action minutes would save a significant amount of our time as far as staff is concerned. But this is simply a question for the Commission to decide relative to your preferences. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chair, and for appropriate action.
Thank you. Any comments? Mr. Manoukian, Commissioner Manoukian.
Just a clarification, you just said the city in whole is moving to which direction?
Towards the action minutes,
Okay.
where the very
The
minimal...
detail.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
The City Council type minutes.
Yes,
Correct.
what the City Council uses and what the planning...
Any other
department-
comments? Mr. Devine?
I would move that we switch to the action minutes.
Any second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Manoukian?
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian?
He left.
We took this vote too fast.
Okay, then let's not, I'm going to withdraw the vote, I'm going to withdraw the motion at the chair's behest. What did you want to say, Mr. Abkarian?
Because the videos are being archived now, it is going to be much easier to actually get. Now, let me ask you a question. Could someone go back to 4 months ago and get an archived video from our online?
Online, from 4 months ago,
Yes.
I don't
Well,
believe...
no, I'm sorry. Let's start from now going forward 4 months ago, and somebody wants to go back, not that they're being archived now. If somebody wants to go back, let's say 4 months from today's date, if somebody wants to go back and look at a video today, because now it's being archived, could they go ahead and back and do that?
I don't
4
understand.
months from now?
Yes.
Because, they started doing archiving as of, I think, last meeting or the meeting before or something.
2 meetings ago, and we've
okay.
actually been having some difficulty, but yeah, the point is, once they're archived, they stay on our website. And
For how
you can
long?
go back. I don't believe there's any limit as to how long they're keeping them.
And then the action minutes would basically say, if I make a comment, it would just abbreviate what I said?
No, it just talks about the action. For instance, it would say on this, that on the minutes were approved.
Well,
That's correct. It
I
would
think
say the
it-
corrections. It would be minutes are approved, or if we have, for instance, the class specification, that it would probably just say, motion made by to approve the class specification.
I think the deliberation is covered too. Is that correct, or? Right before the vote, I remember reading some of those minutes. It just covers when they deliberate what everyone's position is, and just.
Yes, that can be done, and also the speakers, perhaps, who would come up and speak either in favor or against something. An action minute format could identify, so-and-so spoke in favor of the motion, so-and-so spoke against. That sort of thing can be included. But again, very brief, not 3 or 4 paragraphs of what an individual speaker got up and spoke about.
Yes, I'm sorry, did you want to continue?
Yeah, I have gone back weeks ahead, and sorry, Sam.
No, that's okay.
I've gone back months even back, and I've done a PDF search on something I downloaded, and I was able to immediately find a particular paragraph of something that I've said. Probably not as easily can I find those on a DVD. I probably have to go back, look at the action minutes, remember what I've actually said, and then go back and actually do it. So I like the detailed format. The reason is because on a word search on a computer or something, if I want to go back, it's so much easier than trying to find the action item, remembering that action item relates to this particular issue, instead of doing just a quick word search on a PDF and just finding that area immediately. So I know that you're saying that it's on a DVD, but not having the detail will not allow me to go back and find that particular section immediately, and then I can go back to the video, and if I want to go get more details on it. So that's one of the reasons that I'm not in favor of it, because even though we have the DVD, remembering what I said a year and a half ago on a particular action item is much more difficult than if I just do a PDF on all of them and try to find them all. And I do keep some of these minutes and use them at a future date. So that's the only problem that I have. I'm sorry.
But
Commissioner Mnuchin, sorry.
That was something that I had not even thought about, and that's a very good point. That's because, and it's not just specific phrases. I mean, you don't have to not necessarily forget a certain portion of it. There's no way you can do that on a DVD.
I mean, you can't find that.
What you brought up is and my other suggestion would be maybe the commission might want to consider something in between. It doesn't have to be either this or that. Maybe something that you guys are comfortable with, in the sense that, because you brought up a good point that I didn't even think about that.
Mr. Devine.
Well, I certainly agree with Mr. Abkarian, but I think tonight's minutes are a great example of how we really can't rely on what they say. There were things in there that we had to delete, and it was our comments that were not correct, not accurately portrayed. So even if that is in written minutes and you look at them and it's not what you said, then where are you? You have nothing. You still have to go look at and I agree, looking at the DVD is more difficult than looking at the streaming video.
Just searching the DVD. If the DVD had some sectional searches or something, I understand, but because ours doesn't, it just basically says, here it is. It makes it very difficult for me to go and say, okay, I wanted to talk about, I don't know, you guys talked about firefighters or some other police issue or something. I do a quick word search and I can find exactly 6 items that were noted in the past year and a half and go back to them on a very action item. I won't be able to do that. Even if I do, then I have to remember which section.
Well, you're talking about DVD versus the streaming video. And on the streaming video, it's very easy to find it. That's how I found these problems with these minutes from last week. I pulled up the streaming video, and within 10 minutes, I had zeroed in on what you had said, what I had said, and found out that they were incorrect. So,
can you search something about the fire department, talking about women in fire department, and do a search, and then all the videos will come up?
Well, you can't do that with the minutes either.
The minutes, so you can if you have a PDF of the minutes. And
well, do we have a PDF of these minutes of the civil service?
Sure.
You can download them, and you can just put them in your PDF, and you can do a word search on them.
One suggestion that I
That's the only that I have, because I've been doing that for the past...
Okay, I think we're maybe confusing two things. If you're talking about finding a subject that you want to look at or remember, you can still do it with action minutes. On the PDF file, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Doyle, but they'd still have the file, and you still be able to type in a word, fire department report or whatnot, and still find it, and that'll give you the date and time that you're going to be looking at. Then if you want to look at what was actually said at that meeting, you can go to the streaming video and find it right away. But to say that you're going to be using the PDF, pull up the minutes, and then rely on what those minutes said, because you don't remember, a year and a half ago what you said, based on what I read
3 weeks ago.
Yeah, based on what I read tonight.
3 minutes ago.
Based on what I read tonight, you can't rely on the comments.
Yeah, but that's why we make the changes. I mean, you made the changes, it's done, and we all agreed that the rest of it was correct, and we move forward. Anyways, I don't want to argue. I think there's a differing opinion. I like the detailed minutes. I do, because it gives me a more... anyways.
You like it?
One suggestion.
Yes, Mr. Mnuchin.
One suggestion that I would have is would it be possible that we carry this over to a next meeting where we have a full board, so everybody is able to present their opinion? And because Albert brought up something that I didn't even think about, but in a way also I agree with Art Devine in a sense that you can still search, but it's not going to be this detail. But I would recommend we consider maybe do this at the next meeting where we will have time to digest this, and because at least for me, I'm too new for me to be able to. If you guys have a longer experience in reviewing some of the stuff, is it helpful? Are you able to bring it up on a different? So I would recommend maybe we should take time to digest this. Is this something that we have to do tonight?
I think that'd be fine.
Up to you
I think
guys.
what I'd like to see, if we're going to do it, is examples. We have our minutes, let's have examples of other commission minutes over the last...
Good idea.
Yeah, this way, Mr. Coleman will be here as well, and he can...
And we can have those
Because
examples.
if it's something that is going to affect all of us, I think he should definitely be here when we're making a vote.
If I include in that, if I may, some of the council minutes also, which are
That
at.
says, yeah, council as well. I meant, yeah, because they're very abbreviated. Council minutes are like 2 pages long, unless, I think maybe on controversial topics, and that's what has me concerned, is a lot of what we do has similar effects. We're basically the city council, because our decisions are not appealable. We make final decisions that don't go up to the city council, and we don't generally have the ability to budget out money, for instance, to transcribe tapes in order for us to have the background necessary if there's any action. So I kind of tend to lean to Mr. Epkarian, but I'd like to see them to see exactly what City Council does and what some of the other commissions do. So with that, motion to continue. Yes.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Commissioner Karian?
Yes.
Chair Gantis?
Yes. What is next?
Report of Fire Protection Engineer classification, title, and job specification.
Mr. Doyle to Mr. Braden, I think.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this report was produced as a result of last week's meeting in which the Commission asked whether it was proper to use the legal description of fire protection engineer and under what circumstances. My report covers that issue. I have placed in front of each of you, as well as given a copy to Ms. Torres, the email that was attached to the previous emails that were part of my report, but the first paragraph is something new that I received from Ms. Sally Strubinger of the Board for Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors, so that will also be a part of the record, and I'll discuss that once I get into my report. But in essence, as Commissioner Devine pointed out at the last meeting, Business and Profession Code, Section 6732, prevents the use of a title of fire protection engineer without a license. And the question is what does that mean, use of the title of, in this case, fire protection engineer? So I conducted a great deal of research going back into the legislative intent and the administrative interpretations of that particular language, because what the use of the title meant was not spelled out in the statute. And I have concluded, as indicated in my report, that what that means is that the individual who is using a particular title, in this case fire protection engineer, cannot use that title in making presentations to the public or representing themselves unless they are actually a fire protection engineer. And I've given a couple references in support of that proposition. First is Assembly Bill 969, which talks about the practitioner is prohibited only from calling himself in this case it's traffic engineer, but it's the same reference to how one may use that title. As I noted in my report, there's very few references anywhere in the statutory or regulatory material that use the term fire protection engineer. Secondly, referred to administrative regulations that talk about the individual, unless they are licensed, may, and it references he or she, may or may not use that title unless they're licensed. I also spoke with Larry Crest, who's a member of the Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors, who said that they did not care whether a city used a particular title, such as fire protection engineer, in their budget and in their job specification. What they were concerned with is if somebody went out and represented themselves to the public, some city employee, as a fire protection engineer, when in fact they were not licensed to do that. The later report that I got from Ms. Stubinger, which incidentally arose out of a telephone message I left to her just to make sure that I had crossed all the I's and dotted the T's as to what she thought would be the propriety of using fire protection engineer in our budget and in our job specification. And her answer was that she thought we should change the title. And while I think, as I've indicated in my report, that's one of the resolutions, that's not a legal requirement that we would have to do. So with that, I've proposed a couple of resolutions. One would be that we could go to the City Council with a separate job title called Fire Protection Specialist, or whatever we wanted to make it. And if City Council approved that as a budgeted position, then we could come back to you with a job spec that created that position of fire protection specialist, still leaving in place the fire protection engineer, because number one, we do have somebody on board who is actually a fire protection engineer, and number two, we may hire somebody in the future that actually is licensed with that title. So that's one option. The other option is either whether the City Council approves that as a budgeted position or doesn't, we can still use the title fire protection engineer in both the budget and the specification, but just essentially pass administrative policy that unless you are a fire protection engineer who is licensed, you can't use the title in making your presentations, representations to the public. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Mr. Abkarian.
One of the problems that I have is that an unlicensed engineer going to another city, putting on their CV or resume, basically is going to call themselves fire protection engineer. And that's basically going to the public. That's representing themselves as an engineer, because that's the title that they had on the position, and now they're putting it on an application to apply for a job somewhere else. And I think that that is actually misleading. If they're not an engineer and they're basically putting on an application that they're fire protection engineers, that in my opinion is a misleading. It's not an internal issue only, because that's a job title we're giving this Mr. or Mrs. A. That becomes basically a title that they legally could use in a different position. If somebody says, if they're signing a letter to another city, another department, and a private entity, they're basically putting in their fire protection engineer as a title, because that's their title, that's what we hired them for. So I personally, after reading all the documentation, and now I'm of the opinion that we should definitely change or either have a separate heading as a specialist, and have that person if that person is hired as an engineer, they can have a fire protection engineer title, and if they're not an engineer, and they will be hired as a fire specialist, fire protection specialist.
Okay.
And this way, we're not, I'm looking at I'm reading what Sally Strubinger has said. It says, in definition of fire protection engineer can be found in section 404. There are no restrictions concerning the practice of fire protection engineering as there are for civil engineers or everything else. She does say, however, on her initial letter that she would like to see us either change it or revise it or do something else. And I would like to see a separate heading for just the fire protection specialist, because I think that using that particular title outside for a resume, for letters, for anything else that goes on to other people, I thought that they were all engineers. If somebody told me fire protection engineer, I would immediately assume that they're engineers.
As I recall, Mr. Doyle, they are engineers. We just are trying to expand this to persons other than fire protection engineers.
That's correct.
So in other words, we're opening this up to the position would be, in other words, if we changed it to fire protection specialist, right now we would not hire a fire protection engineer under what you're proposing or what the fire department's proposing that isn't an engineer. We're just opening it up to civil, mechanical, anything other than a fire protection engineer because it's such a limited field. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Let me finish. And so they are going to be licensed engineers that are fire protection engineers. They just don't have a fire protection engineer license, or they may not. We have one that does. We now have one that is a fire protection engineer. And as I recall, because we didn't get back the packet, but my recollection is that you wanted to open it up because we're having difficulty finding people. So the suggestion in my mind to do it as a fire protection specialist, you're probably going to have engineers come in here that would be insulted to take that position because it doesn't have engineers on it. But in any event, now, Mr. Devine, I know you're chomping at the bit.
Chomping at the bit. And I think you bring up an excellent point, Chairman Gaddis. However, in the reply from the state, there's one sentence in here, or two sentences, that I think address what you just said. It says, engineers licensed in other fields may not use the title fire protection engineer. Each engineering title is restricted for use only by those persons who are licensed in that particular field. So I think that answers the question that we can't have a civil, structural, a chemical come in, take the test, and be assigned or awarded or given the title of fire protection engineer.
I disagree. I think you can be awarded the title. I don't think she said you can't use the title, but they cannot do those services that are restricted to a fire protection engineer. I think it would be similar to be, let me finish. It would be similar to me moving to Arizona to work for Greyhound Bus Corporation as an in-house counsel. I'm still an attorney, but I'm only licensed in the state of California, and I have to so identify myself. I'm still an attorney, licensed in the state of California, and that's how you have to do that. I think it's a similar situation. Now, Mr. Abkarian, who's also chomping at the bit.
I think that, I want to do the right thing. I'm just reading this letter from the enforcement analyst from Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. And it basically says, and she's specifically talking about titles. It says engineering license, and I want to repeat what it says. Engineering licenses and other fields may not use the title. It doesn't talk about duties. It says the title, fire protection engineer. Each engineering title is restricted for using title is restricted for use only by those persons who are licensed in that particular field. So she continually uses the title. She's not using the duties. She says the use of the title fire protection engineer is prohibited. Each engineering title is restricted for use only by those persons who are licensed in that particular field. And this comes from the enforcement, professional engineers and land surveyors enforcement lady. And then she says, well, I'm not really sure if what I said is really true. And then she changes her mind maybe sometimes. But what this says in here in that one paragraph is very telling. I mean, it specifically says that an engineer title is restricted to that particular field. That's what she said. So I'm not really sure if, I appreciate what Mr. Brayton said. I'm just looking at an enforcement analyst saying, quoting a paragraph specifically from a Business and Professional Code section 6732 and 6787 that says that a title is restricted from using titles by other engineers.
Well, we don't have the package here. That's a kind of a restriction on us. What actually, Matt, does the fire protection engineer do? I can't recall the specific duties. Do they to be an engineer, you can do, even though you're right about the title.
Does anyone have the old
packet?
Sorry, the packet containing the specification?
Well, what it says that their duties are. Because you can do, if you're not you just can't, like, stamp plans. You can't do what a fire protection engineer can do, okay? But here I read that you can still you could be an unlicensed fire protection engineer. You just can't, you have to identify yourself. That's what I read out of this. But the problem here is if we change it to fire protection specialist, we're going to offend any other engineer. And if we leave it at fire protection engineer, we're limiting our thing. I think we need to reach what we're actually, do we actually need to have an engineer? Is that what the deal? I don't know.
Mr. Chair, I have a proposed resolution, but I'd like to hear it.
Mr. Nichols. Name, please.
Chairman Gantis, Commissioners, Doug Nichols, Fire Prevention Coordinator for the Glendale Fire Department.
Is this person your underling?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is this person a non-sworn, non-public safety person as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Fire prevention is comprised of non-sworn personnel. Okay. We have some sworn that work within the ranks, but typically we have non-sworn, non-safety personnel within fire prevention.
Mm-hmm. So now what does okay, go ahead, you could talk.
Yes, I actually oversee our fire engineering unit, and we have a variety of tasks, and we have also, as you mentioned, we do have a fire protection engineer on staff, and that particular individual oversees many of our major projects. For example, currently the Americana at Brand project, which is certainly a major project in the city, overseeing all the fire protection system analysis of that. Another critical project is the Embassy Suites, where we have a multi-story building that requires a very complicated smoke evacuation system. So while our fire protection or engineering staff are not into the design elements, we are critiquing designs. We are analyzing designs. We are looking at reports for the designs, and it could be fire alarm systems, fire sprinkler systems, smoke evacuation systems, hood extinguishing systems, such as you might have at a hamburger restaurant, something like that. So we are analyzing a lot of that. So most of the time, the fire protection engineer on our staff is analyzing plans that have been submitted for fire protection systems. Very familiar with the fire code, also with the building code, and then we also have other staff that do similar analysis, but for less complicated projects. And we
that are not engineers.
Correct. So again, we rely on our fire protection engineer for overseeing the review and installation. Actually, could be inspection of these very complicated fire engineering, fire protection systems. So that would be the umbrella. I don't have the actual job descriptions with me, but just in a nutshell, that's what we rely on that individual to do on a day-to-day basis.
Mr. Devine, I see you chomping at the bit again.
I believe that we're kind of off track here. I don't think what we're talking about has anything to do with the duties or responsibilities of the individual, whether he's a fire protection engineer or a fire protection specialist. We're not talking about duties. I believe the item that was brought to this commission 2 weeks ago was a job bulletin that was entitled Fire Protection Engineer. And in that bulletin, there was a requirement that he be licensed by the state as a fire protection engineer. And what they were asking this commission to do is change that so that instead of having him licensed as a fire protection engineer, which was difficult to do at this time, as they explained to us, they were asking, well, can we have a civil engineer or a structural engineer or a chemical engineer who has a license in those fields apply for and be given that job and that job title?
Right, that's what I recall.
And that's what was before us, not whether the duties fit, a chemical engineer or a structural engineer. It was the title. And based on what I read and what Mr. Commissioner Abkarian just read, they cannot use the title fire protection engineer regardless of whether they're a civil or a structural or a chemical. And that's where...
To the public.
To the public. So what this proposal that Mr. Braden does, in my mind, it says, all right, city, you can advertise for a fire protection engineer who is not a licensed fire protection engineer. You can give him the title, but you also have to write a policy that says, sir, we've given you a title of fire protection engineer, but don't you dare tell anybody that you're a fire protection engineer.
Exactly correct.
Don't you?
Your point.
Don't you dare have cards printed that says fire protection engineer. Don't you dare submit an application to another city that says fire protection engineer. And to me, that is disingenuous, that's misleading, and I think it could be very quickly solved and resolved. Following Mr. Braden's second resolution is to have a separate bulletin that will allow us to hire fire protection specialists, or whatever we want to call them, and have those people be civil engineers or chemical engineers or whoever the fire department feels comfortable with. But to approve, and again, the only thing that's before us tonight is whether or not to approve this bulletin. And my recommendation is, based on all the evidence and the very good report by Mr. Braden, is that we do not approve it and let staff come back with an alternate proposal that is legal and not misleading.
I don't think that's what's in front of us. I think all we have is the report. There is no bulletin in last, and I think it was a class spec.
Specification.
Was it a class spec?
Yes.
So that's
just handed
what's
to you.
before us. The report was just a...
No, there's nothing.
It says just a report on fire engineer, classification, title, and job specification.
You're right. And what we did... And
Ron, do we have in front of us, we don't have in front of us the approval of the class spec. We just have your report, am I correct?
No, we made it intentionally broad to talk about the job specification.
So this is...
and
I'm sorry, go ahead.
what we did was you approved it last meeting, subject to a follow-up report, and which has been given. And now, if you want to, you have to rescind that prior approval, and that would possibly create some problems with recruitment. Since I'm talking, if I might suggest, this is now April. We're preparing the budget to go to City Council. We're not going to hire anybody, I don't believe, before the budget's approved. And talking to Mr. Doyle, he's willing to go to City Council and put some phraseology, having them approve a position. It's not going to increase funding or money or anything like that.
Thankfully.
Because we can't really change we can't change a title that's not approved by the City Council, in their budget. And we'd have time to do that, and then bring it back to you, assuming that, which I think Council would approve it, it's just a ministerial task, and bring it back to you at that point to approve a separate job specification.
Is the bulletin out already on this?
Chairman Gaddis, no.
Okay.
We deliberately did not proceed with any recruitment at this point while this was swirling around. So
good.
We do have a vacancy for, I believe it's a fire protection engineer 1, and we're ready to proceed at any point. But I think what option 2 here has a resolution is certainly something we could do. I could see this as a consent item on the City Council agenda, not that big of a deal. Creating the new title and sort of run it as a parallel recruitment process, either on the same bulletin or perhaps two separate bulletins at the same time. If we happen to get individuals who are licensed as FPE, we'll take them. If we happen to get people who meet the qualifications otherwise but are not licensed, but they may be a structural or civil engineer, we can take them and test them and hopefully hire somebody. If the person does in fact have the FPE background, then we'll call them a Fire Protection Engineer 1. If they don't, call them something else.
Not background license.
Correct. Correct.
Mr. Nichols, what's the situation in terms of, my understanding was this was rather urgent. Are we okay to wait? And this process probably is going to take a couple of months, I would think.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, as you probably can imagine, we're always in a time crunch when we are trying to solve personnel problems. Actually, we're short 4 staff right now within fire prevention, 2 inspectors and 2 plan checkers.
But we're talking about engineers.
Yes. And
I don't care about the others.
Yes. Well, it has an impact regardless.
Why is
yes,
that?
we are short of staff because we actually had to pull one of our staff members off of the inspection team to assist us in plan checking, just with the Americana brand, which is about 50% of our time right now until they finish up.
But you're not going to fill it.
Should be done pretty soon.
Yeah, you're not going to fill this before.
No.
There's no way you're going to fill it before Americana, and my guess is you're going to have a down on a word.
We are hoping so, but it's certainly impacted us now. So just to point out, we do have a couple of shortcomings within our staffing, so we are looking to fill those as soon as possible.
And arguably, if you do, I suppose if you're really short of a fire protection engineer, you could bring somebody on as a temp on a contract basis to fill in if you need to get done with the Americana until we resolve this issue, couldn't you? Couldn't that be done, Matt, if necessary?
Yes.
Matt, let me ask you this. If it's necessary, could we not put the bulletin out if we rescind this action, put the bulletin out on the old jobs, under the old class specification with the fire protection engineering license, and then at least you've done something, and then when we create the fire protection specialist, do a parallel bulletin on that, and whatever you get, you get?
We could certainly do that.
Okay. Yes, somebody had something to say. Mr. Manukian.
I had a question, just want to confirm, this action was taken last time?
Yes.
Okay. Can we have a motion to rescind?
Is that your motion?
Yes, that is my motion.
Under the Roberts Rule, the people who actually voted in favor of it could rescind it.
Okay,
So
we
who
have to
voted
see
in
who
favor
voted.
of it?
No, that's to reconsider. You can
Ask for
rescind, to have a new motion to rescind can just be
That's true, doesn't
by
it?
anybody and seconded by anybody and voted on by anybody. You're taking a motion to reconsider.
Okay.
Motion to rescind?
Absolutely.
Second.
Roll call. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Commissioner Carrion?
Yes.
Chair Gantis?
Yes. And what's our next motion, Mr. Braden?
That's it?
No, my next motion is to actually have a separate class specification that would not include the name of engineer, fire protection engineer, picked by Mr. Doyle to the City Council for their approval as a class So then we can go ahead and hire people under that class specification if they're not fire protection engineers.
And that item would have to be brought back here for a specification. A specification would have to be prepared, which we can do.
Before it goes to City Council?
No, that comes
After the City Council.
My suggestion would be that I'd be concerned, knowing engineers the way I know engineers, they're not a lot like lawyers, that they'd probably want somewhere in their engineers. So would it hurt?
Everyone is like you.
I understand. Fire protection specialist, we're still going to have an engineer, correct? In parentheses, engineer, in parentheses.
Boy,
You don't like that?
I don't want to.
You don't like it, Mr. Devine?
Chair Gannis, what I would recommend, I'm not sure whether we need to take a motion to direct staff to do that. What we just did is we rescinded our action last time, which approved the bulletin subject to a legal opinion.
Okay.
We got the legal opinion, it was a negative, and we rescinded it. That really puts it back into Mr. Doyle's shop, and he has the direction, he's heard what people have said, and I don't think we need to direct him. Let him use his ingenuity and resources and come back with a solution and...
Then asking too much from Mr. Doyle. No, I'm just kidding.
Do you want direction, or are you okay, Mr. Doyle?
I've had direction last 20 minutes.
That's how we got into this mess to begin with.
You need direction, Mr. Doyle?
I know, I need no further direction.
Okay.
No, but I mean, we don't need to we don't need to direct you to do anything. This is something that you would do on your own, that you'll be able to go, okay, as long as you can do it on your own.
The next thing we see is the class spec for whatever it's entitled.
Correct.
Okay. Next, what is next?
Agenda
Mr. Braden?
Just with the caveat that whatever Mr. Doyle comes up with, it's ultimately approved by council, that's the title you'd be approving when it came back to you, so
Well,
that if...
and I'm not going to decide what
That's why
what I
second
would
your
be
motion.
doing, because I mean, if it comes back, it says fire protection specialist / engineer.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we suggest that he bring it back to us first, a draft copy of it, and for review and approval, and if we agree with it, then it can go to council.
I think that's what his motion was. That's why I seconded it.
What did you, I thought you said you wanted to use the position title. I must not have heard you.
I want to use a title that would not violate what Ms. Sally Stormbringer said that we are violating. That's what I want to do. Anything that complies with that, I have no issues with. I don't know if that's as clear as I can get.
Mr. Chair, that direction is clear, and
Okay,
we will
done.
come up with a title, bring it to council.
Then I'll leave it up to you. As long as it
Which will not
complies with
violate.
that, then we don't have an issue.
Okay. What is next?
Agenda forecast.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, this item is the agenda forecast. As you see, the items that are upcoming for the next few meetings are listed. The April 23rd meeting will have the quarterly report on advertising budget expenditures. It won't be as detailed as the previous one you'd seen, which dealt with half of a year's worth of advertising, but it will talk about the last quarter and some of the things that we're working on from an advertising standpoint. We'll also have the report on meeting minutes preparation brought back per our earlier direction. On May 14th, we have, again, two brief reports, and one dealing with the need for selecting outside hearing officers, if that's the desire of the commission, as well as a report on meeting cancellations. So,
Anything else? What is next?
Reports and information, past due employee performance evaluations.
Well, we don't have Mr. Coleman here to do our past due employee evaluations. Seems to me our list of no past dues is starting to decrease a little bit. City clerk's office is no past dues. City manager's office is no past dues. City's treasurer's office is no past dues. Water and power with 368 employees, no past dues. Library, no past dues. Planning, no past dues. Police, 361, no past dues. Public Works, 309, no past dues.
Water and power, 368, no past dues.
Didn't I say 368? I think I said them.
You did? Okay.
I believe I did. But that's right, 368. But we are starting to slip. It seems to me we have less, Mr. Doyle. This isn't the most exciting report I've seen. But in any event, that's our past dues. What is next?
Civil Service Commission and our staff comments.
Any commission and or staff comments? Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, I just want to comment, the commission has been provided with the annual report on workforce demographics. This is prepared by our internal audit unit. It's done every year, and it addresses the hiring activity and the overall demographics of city employment on a calendar year basis. So this was released just last week, and the copy is available for your review.
Who is in charge of having this printed up, Mr. Doyle?
This would be Mr. Bill Fox, who's our city auditor, and in particular one of his principal auditors, Jason Bradford.
So this had nothing to do with HR. It wasn't a coincidence that Mr. Narcissians is on the cover of this. Is that correct? I thought maybe there was a little in-house,
Perhaps.
Any other comments or questions from the civil service? What is next?
Closed session,
We have no closed session. What is next?
adjournment.
We are adjourned.